Fireworks erupted in the sky, their brilliant bursts illuminating the streets below, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Yet, amidst the revelry, despair hung thick in the air. A girl was meant to lose her life on this very day. As the procession of the new emperor's carriage rolled by, people whispered among themselves. The celebration was for the coronation of the third prince, marking the moment when the king was to abdicate. But rumors swirled, rumors that the king's abdication was no mere succession, but the result of the deaths of his two older brothers. A ruthless act to claim the throne. Though some denied the accusation, there were others who feared that the new emperor had even ended his own younger sister's life. This was Carlos York, the seventh emperor of the Kingdom of York, a man with fair skin, dark hair, and eyes that could freeze a person's soul. Meanwhile, a woman with striking white hair was being roughly escorted by two guards. They treated her with disdain, irritated that they were tasked with such a duty while an important coronation ceremony was taking place. As they dragged her along, she suddenly heard a faint whisper. "Lilith Nicola." Her mind reeled. Who was it? The voice spoke her name like petals falling from a delicate bloom, and she wondered if it was a sign from God. Was this divine intervention, a last-minute salvation? But just as the thought crossed her mind, the wind stilled, and before her stood Carlos York, silent, his face a blank mask. His cold eyes met hers, and for a moment she was struck by his presence. Her emerald gaze locked with his, both of them caught in an inexplicable moment of recognition. Suddenly, one of the guards kicked her to the ground. "Move!" he barked. "Are you trying to ruin the coronation?" Carlos looked away, dismissing her with a simple, detached order. "Keep going." The guards, without a shred of empathy, remained kneeling before the prince, showing no remorse for their cruelty. The girl struggled to her feet, her body aching, her spirit broken. The realization hit her like a wave: God did not exist, at least not for her. If he had, he would not have allowed her life to be so meaningless. Later, at the coronation ceremony, Carlos knelt before a priest, who questioned if the new emperor would rule over the Kingdom of York and bring wealth and prosperity to the land. Carlos solemnly swore in return, but as he did, the girl, bound and gagged, was thrown into the river by the guards. The current was merciless, and the young woman, struggling against the rope around her mouth, was engulfed by the water. As Carlos knelt down, accepting his coronation, it was a moment of pride for him but an agonizing one for her. The crown was placed on his head, the scepter in his hand, his triumph, her demise. The knights knelt, proclaiming, "Long live Emperor Carlos!" The girl, tossed into the river like a mere inconvenience, sank beneath the surface, her tears mixing with the endless current. She was gone, her life quickly swallowed by the waters. In the past, she had been born into one of the oldest and most prestigious families in the Kingdom of York, the Nicola family. Her name was Nicola. At the age of 16, her father, a marquis, died in a supposed accident, and her mother was consumed by grief, following soon after. Under the laws of the kingdom, her father's properties and titles passed to her maternal uncle until she turned 18. However, this was far from a fair inheritance. Her uncle, not wanting to care for her, sent her to the cruel Count Bellows, to be married off in a loveless arrangement. Ironically, her fiancé, Antoine Bellows, had fallen in love with another girl, a girl with striking eyes and fiery hair, Elena Bornito, the daughter of Nicola's uncle. Elena, with her kind and beautiful exterior, was loved by not only Antoine but by many others in their family. But beneath the surface, Elena's true nature was revealed. She was cruel, manipulative, and vile. Yet Nicola, despite being the daughter of the former count, was powerless in the current family. She was treated like a servant, mocked and humiliated by those who had once been her equals. Elena's cruel words echoed in her ears. "Antoine would never like you. You're not worthy of him." In that moment, Nicola realized the depth of her misfortune. Elena, with her beauty, was the true object of Antoine's affection, not her. Then came the day Nicola overheard a conversation between her uncle and Count Bellows. They discussed the inheritance of her father's title and how it would be transferred to her uncle on her 18th birthday. But worse, she overheard her uncle's sinister thoughts. He had not simply allowed her father's death, it had been orchestrated. This was the moment Nicola realized the truth. Her father had been assassinated, not in an accident, but by those she trusted the most. Fury consumed her as she confronted Count Belows. In a fit of rage, she attempted to strike him, but he easily disarmed her and slapped her, dismissing her as nothing more than a nuisance. He declared that if she kept quiet, she would be spared. But now that she knew the truth, he had no choice but to eliminate her. Dragged away by the guards, Nicola's heart burned with anger. She cursed them all, vowing that one day they would pay. With her last breath, she cursed the world that had forsaken her. But as the river's current swallowed her whole, something extraordinary happened. Instead of dying, Nicola found herself awakened in a place that seemed familiar. A bright light shone upon her face, and for a moment she wondered if she had returned to her room. But the warmth and comfort of her mother's voice shattered her confusion. "Lilith, wake up. It's time to prepare to go out." Tears streamed down her face as she recognized her mother's voice, the same voice she had longed for. Was this a dream? If so, it was a beautiful one. Her mother, Mila Nicola, a blonde beauty with eyes like golden light, inquires why she doesn't wear shoes. What if she gets sick? Lilith embraced her. Lilith, now certain that she had been given a second chance, whispered with joy, "I'm so happy to see you again." Her mother, thinking she had simply had a nightmare, patted her gently on the head. But Lilith knew this was no ordinary dream. This was a chance to rewrite her fate, to protect her family and ensure that those who had destroyed her would pay for their sins. Her mother told her it was time to get ready to go out, and Lilith, still with tears in her eyes, asked where they were going. Her mother replied, "Today, you will meet Count Belows." It was the first day she would meet her fiancé, Antoine. Nervous, she approached him, seeing him reading a book. He looked up at her, his expression indifferent, his brown hair falling loosely around his face. Lilith's heart sank. She had been fooled in her past life into believing he cared for her. He didn't. He was in love with Elena. Lilith's face twisted with fury as memories of the past flooded back. Her mother, noticing the change in her expression, asked if she was all right. "I'm fine," Lilith replied, though her heart burned with the memory of betrayal. As she prepared to meet Antoine, Lilith knew that this time, things would be different. No longer would she allow herself to be the victim. This time, she would seek revenge on those who had ruined her life. She would not let it slip away again. When she looked at her wardrobe, she realized something. Her clothes had all been the same color, red. But no longer would she wear red, a color that symbolized her past pain. Instead, she ordered a blue dress to be made, symbolizing her new life. From now on, she would wear blue, and she would make her enemies regret underestimating her. Her heart hardened with determination as she moved forward. This time, nothing would stand in her way. They always tried to persuade her father to support the second prince, but her father was never truly invested in taking sides. His indifference, however, didn't prevent their family from supporting the second prince due to her engagement with Antoine. Fortunately, Lilith had knowledge of what had transpired in her past life. She knew that those who had supported the second prince had met tragic ends, except for Count Belows, who had secured some protection and thus escaped the worst of it. Lilith was curious about the third prince, Carlos York, and inquired about him. Her father explained that the third prince suffered from a strange illness, one that caused his mother to become a mere servant to ensure he never attracted any attention to become the next ruler. Stroking her head with a sense of care, he reminded her that matters of state were not as simple as they appeared. Lilith considered revealing to her father what she knew from her past life, how Carlos York had ultimately become the emperor, but quickly dismissed the thought. She knew he would never believe her. Instead, she made a mental note to tell him later, when the time was right. In this life, their family needed to support the third prince in order to survive, but they had to tread carefully. The butler, Barton, greeted Lilith as he led her to a different room where she could wait for her father. Her heart fluttered at the thought of seeing Antoine again. The butler kindly offered to guide her, but she insisted on exploring on her own. He hesitated, warning her that the mansion was large, and she might get lost. Lilith smiled warmly and reassured him that she knew the place well enough. Her memories took her back to the first time she met Antoine. In her past life, he had been reading a book titled Twilight of Saint Langria. She had been so embarrassed to approach him that she merely greeted him before quickly running out of the room. Later, she saw Elena approaching him, assuming she was her. As a maid, Lilith had cleaned and swept these halls daily, and she had noticed that the books in this particular room were all bound in red. When she spotted the book she was looking for, a smile spread across her face. This was easy. Now, all she had to do was wait here, sitting elegantly, until Antoine arrived. Just as she settled into the chair, the door swung open, and there he stood, Antoine, looking surprised. He blinked and asked, "Who are you?" Lilith feigned surprise, putting on her most adorable expression. "Ha!" she exclaimed. At the sight of her, Antoine blushed, stammering as he repeated his question. With a smile, she introduced herself. "I'm Lilith." Antoine, still nervous, stepped forward and apologized for startling her. Lilith assured him that it was perfectly fine, remarking that it was a relief he hadn't scared her enough to make her drop the book. Antoine's eyes widened when he noticed the book she was holding. He explained that it was one of his favorites, and seemed pleased that she shared his interest. Lilith, however, wasn't much of a fan. "The ending is so tragic," she mused. "The crow, who has been helping humans all along, loses his life to them. The god who gave him his mission was, in the end, the devil who receives human souls." A sudden thought crossed her mind, and she looked at him with a deep, questioning expression. "I don't understand why it has to be that way." Antoine, his expression softening, explained, "It's human nature. In the face of great temptation, good can turn to evil." Lilith, impressed, praised him for his insight, commenting that she hadn't considered that perspective before. She then asked for his name, and he told her. As she stood up abruptly to leave, she suddenly tripped, and Antoine rushed to catch her. Their eyes met in a brief, charged moment. Lilith felt the plan falling into place as she looked away and apologized, explaining that she had stubbed her toe. Antoine, looking uneasy, asked if she had been following her father here. She explained her father is visiting the Count. Antoine commented that his father must be up to something. She pondered for a moment. Was he unhappy with his father's schemes? If so, this could be a useful lever to pull, another pawn to add to her growing collection. Antoine, now flustered, suggested she might enjoy another book. Lilith smiled, a plan forming in her mind. Antoine would become her beautiful, unsuspecting puppet. Meanwhile, Count Bellows and Marquis Nicola were in a heated discussion. Bellows, eyeing the royal power struggle, seemed intent on supporting the first prince. However, Marquis Nicola was unwilling to take a clear side, preferring to remain uninvolved. Bellows raised his voice, insisting that it was unwise to stay out of the conflict, especially given the uncertainty of the kingdom's future. The Marquis, clearly displeased, finally responded that he knows the Count support the second prince. He questioned whether the Count was truly planning to use the second prince to capture the first prince or simply stirring chaos in the royal family to position himself for greater power. Despite the tension, the Marquis remained firm that his main priority was to protect his daughter. If the second prince's faction lost, it would affect Lilith. But even then, he vowed to take matters into his own hands and ensure her safety. After the conversation ended, Bellows and the Marquis parted ways. The Count was left irritated, feeling the Marquis was an obstacle in his plans. He knew that the time would soon come when the question of succession would have to be answered, and he would need to act quickly. Back in the mansion, Lilith and Antoine were engaged in a discussion about an ancient text from the God's Covenant, a scripture written before the four kingdoms became independent. This text revealed that magic once existed in the world, something Lilith hadn't considered before. Antoine, though reluctant, admitted that magic still existed, its practitioners simply kept their existence hidden. Lilith's curiosity deepened, and she inquired about a mysterious group called the Cruel Hunters, who only targeted wizards. Antoine, however, dismissed her question with a cold remark, saying women should only concern themselves with matters like dress and housework. Lilith, feeling a flicker of anger, silently reminded herself that men like him, just like his father, looked down on women. As her irritation grew, the butler arrived and informed her that Marquis Nicola was looking for her. Antoine, feeling uneasy, nervously explained to the butler that they had merely been discussing a book together. Lilith, annoyed by his response, felt a surge of anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Her past life, the moment her father and she left the Count's house, her uncle and Elena would arrive to speak with Count Bellows. What if she could change that? What if she could have her father witness the two of them together? Would that alter their future? With a small, calculated gesture, Lilith removed her necklace, a gift from her mother, and hid it under the couch. She then approached Antoine and informed him that she had to leave. She thanked him for the pleasant conversation and promised to return to read the book again. She handed him the book, and Antoine, visibly nervous, could only stare at it, unsure of how to respond. Lilith, sensing his discomfort, quietly left the room. When she arrived at the carriage, her father, already waiting, asked if she was ready to go. As she moved to climb in, her hand instinctively reached for her neck, only to realize that her mother's cherished necklace was missing. She paused for a moment, then calmly turned to her father. "I must have dropped it in the study," she said. "Please wait for me in the carriage. I'll retrieve it." Once inside the study, Lilith pretended to search for the necklace. The butler, ever observant, asked if he should assist her. "No, it's fine," Lilith replied, her tone soft yet firm. "Everyone is busy, and I don't want to trouble anyone. I'll find it myself." As she began her search, the butler exchanged a quick glance with the maids, who seemed to share a silent understanding. They looked at Lilith with a mixture of admiration and awe, their eyes filled with respect. In their eyes she appeared almost angelic, a figure of grace and poise. Lilith glanced out the window and noticed the carriage had already arrived, the perfect moment for her to make her exit. She straightened, a satisfied smile curving her lips. After a moment of feigned searching, she triumphantly declared, "Ah, here it is!" Lilith, sensing an opportunity, walked down the hallway with casual elegance. She bumped into Elena and her uncle, who immediately grew tense. Elena seemed flustered, nervously stammering as she tried to hide her discomfort. William, ever the arrogant one, fixed his gaze on Lilith, asking with a hint of mockery, "Why are you still here? Hasn't your father left yet?" Lilith's lips curved into a playful smile. "Is it so wrong for me to visit my fiancé, Antoine? After all, we are engaged." Her uncle commented they came to see if the Count knew a good man for his daughter. Lilith leaned in. "By any chance, is the good man your father has in mind for you, Antoine?" The tension in the air thickened. William and Elena exchanged startled glances, clearly struggling to maintain their composure. William stammered, "He's your fiancé. Are you accusing us of meddling in your engagement?" Lilith tilted her head slightly, her tone shifting to a more serious note. "I heard some troubling news," she said, her voice laced with subtle concern. "My grandfather is ill, and there's a rumor circulating that you poisoned him." At her words, William's face darkened. "Where did you hear that?" he demanded, his voice barely controlled. "I don't know who started the rumor," Lilith replied with cool composure. "But I know you would never do such a thing. Still, it bothers me. I'll have to visit my grandfather with my mother soon." She turned and walked past Elena, who stood frozen in place, her face pale with uncertainty. A victorious smile spread across Lilith's lips as she moved past them. She could feel the tension in the air, knowing full well that her words had struck a nerve. The game was in motion, and they were completely unaware of just how much she had already uncovered. Her plan was unfolding perfectly, and from here on out, their lives would be filled with uncertainty and fear. Back in the carriage, her father raised an eyebrow and asked, "What took you so long?" Lilith nestled against her father's arm, a mischievous, childlike expression on her face. "I met Uncle William and Elena. We chatted for a while," she said, her tone light and playful. Then, her voice dropped, adopting a more thoughtful note. "I couldn't help but wonder, why did they come to meet the Count? Could they be plotting something with him? Or perhaps they're after our family's wealth, just like in the novels. Her father chuckled, dismissing her musings as childish banter, but Lilith could see the glint of curiosity in his eyes. Let's not concern ourselves with that, he said. I'm going to the princess's birthday celebration. Lilith's mind raced as she absorbed his words. This could be her perfect opportunity, one she couldn't afford to miss. She had to meet the third prince. Smiling to herself, she silently prepared for the chance that was now within reach. The royal palace was alive with activity, as a group of maids busied themselves cleaning the floor. Princess Sophia, the late queen's daughter, was the center of the day's celebration. Some of the servants whispered among themselves, questioning the grandiosity of the celebration in her honor. Their gossiping was abruptly cut short when the cool voice of the third prince echoed through the room. Haven't you all learned royal etiquette? His words were sharp, and the maids quickly fell silent, fear evident on their faces. When did servants begin speaking so freely about the royal family? With bowed heads, the maids quickly apologized and begged for forgiveness. Carlos, the third prince, considered their pleas for a moment before softening his expression. I'll let it pass this time, he said, his voice calm but firm. But there won't be another time. His gaze softened further as he inquired about his sister. The maids replied that Princess Sophia was most likely in the music room, playing the piano. Carlos nodded and walked away. The maids muttered to themselves that it was strange how his kindness was reserved solely for his sister. Perhaps it was because they both shared the pain of losing their mother. Inside the music room, Sophia was lost in her music, the soft notes of the piano flowing around her. Carlos entered, his presence calming the atmosphere. Are you practicing the piece you'll perform at the banquet? He asked gently. With a small smile, he handed her a beautifully wrapped gift. This is for your birthday, he said warmly. I thought I'd give it to you early, in case Father forbids me from attending the celebration. Sophia blushed, her voice filled with surprise and delight. Thank you, Carlos. She opened the gift to reveal a stunning hairpin, black and blue, with a diamond at its center. It was custom made just for her, a piece that would make her the brightest star at the party. However, her joyful expression faltered as she looked at the hairpin. I'm not looking forward to the banquet, she confessed, her voice heavy with reluctance. It's just a place where people seek a marriage partner. How many of the guests are truly there to celebrate my birthday? Carlos's eyes softened with empathy. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You have me, Sophia, he said quietly. Even if Father opposes it, I'll sneak you out of here. We don't have to do this. But just as quickly as his comforting words had arrived, a sharp pain struck his chest. His breath caught in his throat, and he staggered slightly. Sophia rushed to his side, her face filled with alarm. Carlos, not again, she murmured, urging him to lie down. Minutes later, the palace doctor arrived and confirmed that Carlos's condition was worsening. It was a congenital illness, with no known cause. All they could do was offer him painkillers, and even that was only a temporary relief. The doctor's face was grim. A servant burst in and informed that His Majesty declares His Highness should not attend the celebration. If his illness flares up, it could cause an embarrassing scene. Sophia's heart sank at the cruel reality of her brother's condition. She had hoped for a different outcome, but resigned herself to the doctor's words. I understand, she whispered, though her heart ached for Carlos. Later, at the banquet, the palace buzzed with excitement. It was, after all, the princess's birthday. But Lilith was not here for the celebrations. Her goal was clear: to connect with Carlos, the future king. She searched the crowd for any sign of him but couldn't find him. Growing increasingly frustrated, she turned to her father and casually asked, "Why isn't the third prince here?" Her father raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask about him?" he inquired, curiosity laced with amusement. Lilith laughed lightly, covering her mouth. "Oh, when did I say that? I just heard you were close to the prince." Her casual dismissal didn't fool him, but he said nothing more. In her past life, Carlos had been the one to attack Sophia, taking her purity, an event that changed the course of history. Lilith's mind raced, her curiosity about him growing stronger. Suddenly, beautiful music filled the air, and she turned toward the sound. Sophia had taken to the piano, her delicate fingers dancing across the keys in a medley that enchanted everyone in the room. The audience watched, entranced by her beauty and the sheer grace of her performance. When the music ended, the room erupted into applause, and the king stepped forward to thank everyone for attending. He raised his glass, a signal to begin the banquet. As Lilith made her way through the crowd, she spotted Count Bellows. She lowered her gaze, refusing to acknowledge him. Lilith, sensing her father's discomfort, asked, "Did you fight with Count Bellows?" He nodded. "I did. He asked me to support the first prince, but I refused." Lilith commented, "I think it's a bad idea to stay neutral. We should support the third prince instead." Her father blinked in surprise. "You want me to support the enemy of your future in-laws?" Lilith tried to argue, but he cut her off. "Enough. I'm just giving you an idea of where the Nicola family stands. Don't meddle in my affairs." Lilith pouted, looking away. "Yes, father," she muttered under her breath. As the evening progressed, Lilith noticed the growing excitement among the guests. The princes had arrived, and their beauty was undeniable. Her father, noticing Lilith's eagerness, thought, "Why is she so excited to see the prince? Does she have a crush on him?"